Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. PC Gamer has come out with a fascinating article, and I think it would be interesting for us to discuss it. Hey, D&D power gamers, I promise you'll have more fun if you don't min-max in Baldur's Gate 3. Now, the reason I find this interesting is I think part of the reason I've had some level of success as a content creator is because I don't focus on min maxing. I'm much more concerned with role playing, at least in my content. And it seems like a lot of people in my subscriber base appreciate that. But at the same time, I know there's a ton of people who don't appreciate that, who will come into my Wrath of the Righteous builds and say, this really needed a dip in Monk, or CRPG bro already did this build 10 times better. There are some people who really get the most value from min-maxing heavily in their games. And I'm curious where a lot of you all stand. So let's go ahead and dig into this article, because even though I like the fact that Rob and Valentine opened up this discussion, again, I think it's interesting, I'm not sure if he did it well in this article, and I'm curious about your thoughts. So again, let's go through it. In the first paragraph, he talks about his Neverwinter Nights 2 playthrough, and he says, as my sorcerer, paladin, divine champion, red dragon disciple reached the final war in the afterlife and the epic level Mask of the Betrayer expansion, which I know, many of you have said is absolutely incredible. Any RPG fan should have played it. One of these days, I'll get around to Neverwinter Nights 2, but surprise, surprise, I'm a little busy right now. It'll happen sooner or later, I promise you. Anyway, and struck down a dark god entwined with his own soul in a couple of quick smites from his crafted sword of ludicrous elemental damage. You know what I felt? Empty. I know there's a lot of people watching this video who read that statement and they absolutely agree with it and know what that feeling is like, but for me, it's so weird. If I spend hours poring over the mechanics, like I don't like min-maxing in Wrath of the Righteous or D&D, but in a game like Wasteland 3, I go through every build with a fine-tooth comb. I want to get the maximum amount of damage I can for each single person that I'm playing with. And I expect when I go into combat, I'm going to one-shot the boss. I'm going to mow down all the competition. I expect that this is going to make the game significantly easier. These people who go through the same ordeal, but somehow expect the game to magically still be challenging and are somehow disappointed when it's not, it's so weird to me. I don't get that. Anyway, moving on. So when you dig into the article a little bit more, he talks about why min-max builds are an issue. He talks about how sometimes they'll start off very weak, and then it ramps up much later on. And the problem with that is, from his perspective, you end up inverting the game's difficulty curve. The early levels, during what's meant to be the game's gentle introduction to the mechanics, followed by opportunity to spread your wings and try out new powers, become an awkward fumble of trying to limp through with strange choices that won't pay off until later. He talks about this a little bit more, but at the end he says, there's no need to make the easy stuff hard and the hard stuff easy. Trust the developer enough to follow the difficulty curve they've laid out for you. On some level, I agree with this, because I definitely feel like it's a problem when you look at some content creators. They'll provide these min-max builds and show you a bunch of footage of how much damage this build does at the end and how incredible it is through those last few levels. But it doesn't really prepare the player to understand that, hey, for the first 4 or 5 levels, this build is virtually trash. And your party is basically going to have to carry you the entire game because you're basically able to do nothing. So from that standpoint, what he's saying is correct. But the other issue is, for some people, they enjoy that. They enjoy, hey, you know what? The first 5 to 10 hours of this game are really going to suck. But the next 40 to 50 hours of this game, I'm going to be an absolute god, and it's worth it. I remember I used to love playing Final Fantasy VIII. And Final Fantasy VIII, its magic system, basically you had to draw magic out of enemies and then attach it to your stats. And how much magic you were able to attach to those stats determined how powerful you are. And there was a cheat you could use early on a ship level where you could spend about 7 or 8 hours drawing all the magic from the various enemies that you faced, and then you could attach it to your stats, and you were basically a god for the next 90 hours of the game. And I remember as a young man sitting in the dorm, not going to class when I was supposed to, drawing out magic over and over and over again. It was tedious as hell, but I was like, when I'm done with this, it's going to all be worth it. Again, I don't play that way in a lot of D&D games, but sometimes for whatever reason in the game, it's worth it to me and it's fun. So it's not, yes, technically it's inverting the game's difficulty curve, but it's still serving the way that I want to play. And I still thoroughly enjoyed those playthroughs. And I'm sure that a lot of people who plan to play in a very min-max way when they go through Baldur's Gate 3 are going to figure out a way to enjoy whatever changes they end up deciding to make. Now, his next point gets into the heart of why I don't focus on min-maxing in my content. And he says, when you're making choices for your character for min-maxing reasons, you're not making choices for narrative reasons. Things that would add cool flavor or contribute to a more rounded personality are jettisoned in favor of powerful combos that have no story logic to them at all. So, this is, again, I find this subject fascinating because it fits right into what I'm doing, but I still don't agree with how he's presenting it. Me personally, I don't give builds where you have 3, 4, or 5 different classes because in my mind, there has to be a storyline. There has to be a thread that connects everything that you're doing mechanically. And if I can't present to you a story reason why you have all these different classes, then for me, it's a wash and I'm not doing it. So for virtually all of my Wrath of the Righteous builds, there is one, at most 2 classes. And really for the vast majority of them, it's just one. The class that my character is deeply ties into the way I expect to play them and the way I expect to role play them. All that being said, the reason why I don't agree with the way this is being presented is because I feel like for a lot of people who love to min-max and prefer to play that way, they do things in the opposite order. They figure out what classes they want to use first and then throw in whatever story reason they need to figure out why their classes are set up that way. An example is Staunton Vane in Wrath of the Righteous. If you get him as a party member, he's a hodgepodge of all sorts of different classes. And honestly, it's a terrible build, but it absolutely makes sense because it's representative of this guy who has spent his entire life making terrible choices and being very inconsistent. So even though it's mixing in a bunch of different things, from a storyline perspective, it works. And I feel like these people who take 2 levels of barbarian, 3 levels of shifter, whatever they want to do, they can create their own reason for why this all works. Or frankly, for some people, they don't need a storyline reason for how it works. The only thing that matters to them is that mechanically it works, and that's enough for them to say, I'm going to move forward in the story this way. So you can't say that they're really ruining their experience for doing that because it's literally how they enjoy playing the game. If they try to just stick to the narrative decisions, they would probably hate that. Now, going a little bit further, he talks about how Baldur's Gate 3 is based on 5th edition and basically presents this as another reason why min-maxing isn't something you want to do. It says D&D has changed since before. Baldur's Gate 3 is based on the 5th edition rules, not yet seen in many games, which has substantially streamlined the whole process of building and leveling a character. With fewer mechanical choices and less escalation of numbers, meaning characters don't have to sprint to keep up with rising attack bonuses and 2-hit targets, there's much less potential to accidentally create a weak character. This means it's also much more forgiving of choices made for flavor instead of power. You won't feel a step behind if you want your fighter to be an intelligent sword or for your wizard to wield a bow. Is fifth edition more streamlined? Yes, no question. It's absolutely easier for someone who's completely new to D&D, and I think it was a fantastic choice for Baldur's Gate 3 to be based on fifth edition. But this last sentence, where he's like, if you try to make your fighter be someone who's more intelligent, or your wizard to wield a bow, you won't feel a step behind. There won't be consequence for that. That's not true. That's not even, to be honest, that's not even remotely true. Like, if you want your wizard to wield a bow, then you better make some adjustments to make that happen. Otherwise, it's going to be a really crappy playthrough. If you want your fighter to be someone who gains value from having a high intelligence, you've got to make some adjustments. You can't just level up fighter the usual old okey doke way and figure you're going to have a good time. This statement is not based in reality. And frankly, making these sorts of adjustments, it's not even min-maxing. It's just a basic understanding of the mechanics. So I don't know why he presented it in this way. And honestly, to me, it gets a little more weird a couple of paragraphs down. Even multiclassing has been de-emphasized. It can still be a path to powerful combinations, but it's nowhere near as necessary as it was, and for the most part, small dips into other classes are no longer worth it. Sticking with one class through the whole game should be a perfectly viable way to play, and you'll still get plenty of cool toys to play with if you do. Maybe I haven't played enough tabletop D&D, but I don't feel like there was ever a time when multi-classing felt necessary. Like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to create a viable character unless I multi-class. Like, most of the time, people multi-class either because they just find it fun to put multiple classes together, or it was a great way to show, hey, I really understand the mechanics and I can put weird things together and absolutely make it work because of that understanding. So I can combine 3, 4 classes and it's still a perfectly viable build. But it wasn't necessary. You could still just take a fighter or a sorcerer or whatever all the way through a campaign, and you'd be perfectly powerful, and it would be a very viable way to play. This is another weird point. And I'm certainly not a fan of his last point, but being honest, that's just for personal reasons. It's time to let go of the game guides and Reddit threads and just go with your heart when you get into that character creation screen in August. I don't want you to do that because that means you're going to be watching less of my content. You absolutely want to watch all the game guides and builds that you can right here on Slandered Gaming. Make sure you like and subscribe. But on a more serious note, at the end of the day, I completely agree with what he's saying from the standpoint of, just play how you want to play. No, whatever it is that you want to do, whatever's going to be fun for you, do that. I thought it was a very interesting topic that he opened up, but I don't think he did a good job of making his point. If you want to min-max and nail down every single detail of your character, especially the mechanics, then hey, do that. That's you. That's not particularly me in most games that I play, especially if they're D&D based, but everybody finds their fun and enjoyment in different ways. But anyway, I'm very interested in you all's thoughts, so let me know down in the comments. Are you the type of person who really focuses on role playing and sticking to a narrative, or are you a min-maxer who wants to nail down every single mechanic and detail regarding your character's build? What's most important to you when you're playing a D&D type of game or Baldur's Gate 3 specifically? Hope all of you enjoyed this video. Take care.